All right. Well, I'm excited to see all of you here in the room this morning. We are super thrilled to be embarking on this new voyage of the Power Pitch with AUR. This was the brainchild of Dr. Omri. And Mary and I have had the pleasure of working with Reed and this amazing crew of speakers over the past several months. This group of individuals has some really provocative ideas, and they've been working together, providing each other with peer mentorship, helping to develop their presentations and their ideas, and they have really honed some fantastic talks for you today. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker. Rooshab Gowda is currently a medical student at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. His research interests include FDA regulatory policy, theories of liability for artificial intelligence, and novel frameworks for healthcare for managing healthcare data. He will be starting his radiology residency imminently. Today, he'll be talking to us about blockchain, sustainability, and the future of radiology.
Well, thank you, Dr. Robbins. I'm Rooshab Gowda, and today I'm here to talk to you about blocks. Not these blocks, though, unfortunately. Not these blocks either. Or these, but here. So what do you see? For those of you who see just a dot scurrying across the surface of a pond, or just a rabbit, both of you are wrong. I'm here to tell you this is actually a block. We're talking about an intangible block, a mental block, a block that may prevent you from appreciating the multitude of perspectives that are baked into a given issue. So it is for the main kind of block that we'll be talking about here today, blockchain technologies. I'm sure we've all heard of them, but cutting through the noise and really taking a finer look, what are they? They operate according to a distributed ledger type of framework in which data is decentralized in multiple discrete blocks upon which all views, modifications, edits can be readily traced and tracked down the chain of possession. In other words, blockchain provides a peer-to-peer data storage medium with immutable, readily traceable, and cryptographically secure characteristics. And kind of this legacy, but passively secure every time two are connected to each other, and with a blueprint to reconstruct themselves every time an irate parent smashes them and scatters the pieces across the room. Now, on account of these features, blockchain has captured the world's attention primarily through its use in financial technology. Cryptocurrencies like Ethereum, Bitcoin, and of course Dogecoin have been discovered formalized in that media across a short span of a few years. However, we can tell you today that they might not offer potentially, they offer transformative potential for the practice of radiology. Examples of them: they can facilitate cloud-based storage of medical images and storage-based environments for medical processing. They can facilitate and support peer review amid a global shortage of trained radiologists. They can streamline patient record tracking and link studies across modality, format, and EHR systems. They can augment precision of artificial intelligence models. Gone are the days of CD-ROMs, grading compatibility studies, and loss vision. And these are no mere theoretical benefits. These radiology blockchain products are, in fact, available domestically today. And the Republic of Estonia has actually taken this one step further, having secured all of its citizens' EHR in a nationwide interoperable blockchain network. We in radiology, we pride ourselves as being innovators, rising to the occasion time and time again through our rapid adoption of new technologies and new methods. But these new tools also often are associated with new challenges and new costs. If we were to peel away the financial, regulatory, and administrative expenditures, discover that there's another hidden cost of radiology. blockchain technologies, for all of their myriad methods, are incredibly energy intensive. Their technical sophistication is matched by a commensurately high level of resource demand. And it's important for all of us to keep in mind that we really don't live in a vacuum. We live in a world rife with threats to energy supply, much closer to home than we think. Every day we contend with the steadily accelerating effects of climate change, the growing scarcity of fossil fuels, calls for carbon neutrality across a wide range of industries. I would also be remiss by neglecting to mention the ongoing brutal war in Ukraine and its ramifications for energy markets worldwide, which is why today I'm proposing an Energy Star type system, rating system for these blockchain technologies. Call it a RAD. This would follow a scoring system for departments, clinics, and practices used when deploying these tools, and it resembles the or the green certifications that are already prevalent throughout the real estate industry. The scheme would consider characteristics both of the blockchain tool itself, as well as their intended use in clinical practice, taking note of scale and location, and assigning credits for offsetting savings in eliminating physical servers, in streamlining practice design, and enhancing administrative efficiency. This can then be translated into estimated energy costs and estimated energy outlays when forecasting fewer power and overhead expenses for medical practices, as well as other types of infrastructural costs. To make these figures more vivid, they can be reconceptualized in terms of household day or car hour equivalents of energy expenditures, as opposed to these more abstract, colder statistics of CO2 emissions, metric tons of CO2 emissions or of kilowatt hours. The net benefit would be to not only impose some upstream pressure on the developers of these blockchain products in the first instance, but also to produce more, to promote a broader awareness of these sustainability issues among stakeholders in the radiology community writ large. As radiology moves toward an increasingly digital future, it is incumbent upon all of us to bear sustainability in mind alongside the traditional notions of quality, of safety, and of value. We have long been innovators in medicine, and we have been carrying the torch of progress in our profession since almost the very inception of our field. Over the past century, we have spearheaded fluoroscopy, angiography, telemedicine, and artificial intelligence technologies before disseminating them far and wide across the entire clinical space writ large, sharing them with our colleagues in other medical specialties. Change, adaptation, and incremental improvement is part and parcel what we do every day in radiology. It's, in fact, in our very DNA. Now, I call upon all of you to continue to explore these new technologies with an open mind, just as we always have in the radiology space, but to bear in mind the hidden costs that lie in their wake, and then to eliminate these blocks, so to speak, beginning with you here today. I wanted to give a special thanks to my mentor, Dr. Cheryl Jordan of UNC. I wish she would be here today, but none of this would have been conceivable without her support. And also to the other great presenters, Dr. Robbins and Dr. Scanlon, who will be facilitating today's session. I would also like to thank all of you in the audience for the privilege of allowing me to speak to you here today. This is a QR code to my email address. Please feel free to stay in touch. I hope that you had a great week here in Phoenix, and wish you all safe travels on your way back home. Thank you.
Absolutely amazing. So we will have question and answers after everyone has gone. So hold your thoughts on that. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce to you Flo. She is an R4 chief resident at Mount Sinai West. She is, come July, moving to Stanford. They're very lucky to get her for a body fellowship. She is clearly on a path to be a kick-ass academic radiologist, and you're going to hear about that. She has a leadership role at Rad Discord, and that's what we're going to hear about today. So,
all right. Hi, everybody. That was really hard to follow. That was amazing. So I guess we're going to start and talk about Rad Discord and transforming radiology education. Some of you may already be familiar with it, so bear with me as we go through it together. So March, we'll go back with the origin story. March 2020. Everyone's familiar with this date. COVID happened. It affected everything, and it affected education specifically. In New York, where I'm at, it involves things like Get Me PPE, redeployment with multiple residents across different specialties participating together to take care of the pandemic. And specifically for residents, in-person exams were canceled or postponed. I'm sure a lot of program directors in the room remember this as a very trying time when everyone's schedules were upended. And everyone kind of had to say, you know, it's fine. We're going to get through it together. In June 2020, finally, thanks to a lot of advocacy from this group here, AUR and APDR, we finally discovered that the exams were pushed back, right, to 2021, and we transitioned to remote exams. So as a resident, what did that mean, right? How do we as chief residents, how do we as residents deal with suddenly studying in a different way, in a different format? And what did it mean for education broadly? And I know that we've had a lot of sessions throughout this entire conference that I've been to, all the different sessions about radiology and sustainability in education, and I think we're still grappling with this. So this is one potential thing to think about, but there's many ideas out there. A lot of it is because we had a lot of virtual learning and hangouts. A lot of people had wine hangouts, and this is a picture of our program when we were having our Women in Radiology meet and greet. And part of it was that there are a lot of places were closed for studying. I thought I was going to be in coffee shops in New York City. I was going to go to the New York Public Library, and it was going to be great. Except branches were closed, everything was closed, and suddenly I went from having a community of radiologists in my program to, you know, everyone was suddenly going virtual, going home, and for me studying, right, I became isolated in a really lovely and large 300 square foot apartment. So I was feeling very isolated. And really, this makes us really think about this aspect of radiology, right? We're thinking about sustainability, and what that means is we're thinking about the future of the world, but also radiology, and what that means for our field. And that involves thinking about training our current and future generations, right? When we're thinking about the sustainability of our field, we're thinking about who is a future radiologist of tomorrow? What does that look like? What does education look like in that environment? So one thing just to reflect on, I actually dug up this photo because I somehow forgot. In 2014, I met Salman Khan as part of the AMC, and he has this quote. He says, "It's not about graduation rates and test scores. It's about what those things mean to the outcome of human lives. It's about potential realized or squandered, dignity enhanced or denied." And I'm sure if some of you are familiar with Khan Academy, it's a free online learning platform that provides education across various topics, including the MCAT, sociology, literally anything that you can think of. And this is a call to action for us. How can we transform radiology education given this setting for future generations and for us currently? So let's dig deeper into that. Pre-COVID, educational access looked kind of like this. You'll have different programs, and those are the different colors here, in silos. You have residents, right? Different numbers, different places. You have faculty of different calibers in different areas, and you have different resources. It's very asymmetric access in silos. And COVID happened, and all of a sudden, right, board exams were delayed. This setting changes. A lot of things that we thought were standard, right, we had to rethink together. And all of a sudden, some faculty were remote, and residents had to study and learn and find new ways of learning. And we started looking for this. We started looking for resources. We started looking for faculty. So at the same time, faculty were developing new ways of teaching. We were looking for new resources, all of our residents. And we started thinking, how about breaking those silos? We need access. We need to pass our boards. We need to learn to be great radiologists. And so now we're breaking those barriers as a multi-institution, right, thing. And the best synergy would be if we could find radiologists eager to learn and pair them with radiologists who are eager to teach. That sounds really obvious. And is there some kind of platform we could connect across, right? Get out of my 300 square foot apartment, find other people that are also studying and struggling, and connect. And that happened to be Discord. And for people who are not familiar with Discord, that happens to be a platform that's kind of like Slack or WhatsApp. It's a communication platform where we can chat and connect and get together. It's got a whole bunch of channels and you can connect. It turns into a free live learning community for everyone, for radiologists and trainees. So October 10th, 2020 was when this was started. And given how much you may or may not have heard about it, it's only about a little over a year old. So Grace was the one who started it, and she connected with radiology leaders from across the country who felt very similarly, and we call them the Power Rads, and also found faculty. I'm sure you recognize some of the faces on this board. I'm sorry that if your face is not on here, but we have so many faculty, and if you just go through the Rad Discord Twitter account, you'll see all the different people that have come together to kind of share their knowledge, share their resources, and kind of share in that community aspect of transforming education. Everyone here is a medical education innovator. So since it was created in October of 2020, we sped up to 50 members, then 1,000 members, then 1,500 members. We took 2 series of boards and then became an Ant Mini finalist in September, just this past year. And we connected radiologists from around the world, right? This is something that I was blown away by when we looked at our statistics. We have over 2,000 verified radiologists from around the world and over 340 institutions from over 53 countries. And we've become a haven for radiology education leaders in academic and private practice, across institutions and internationally. So it includes things like chat and text forums, voice channels. So during board study time, just a very snapshot window of what was happening, members engaged in up to 334 posts and 1,000 speaking minutes per week. People would just hopped on, said, I wanted to do a study session, we're going to do it right now. We logged on Saturday Zoom sessions, and rather than having crickets, right, everybody was eagerly signing up to take cases from people who are willing to teach. And it was amazing. We had over 150 people logged in at the time and people who watched the recordings afterwards. And this really is member-driven grassroots education. So we connected those radiologists eager to learn, radiologists who are eager to teach, and with open access technology, and built that sense of community to create a free, open access radiology community. And when I say we, I'm not meaning the Power Rads or Grace or anyone, really all of us in this community. And we really grew together in this digital radiology education ecosystem, where in our community, we are all innovators. So the goal and the vision really is to flatten access to knowledge, right? These silos are artificial silos, right? They were traditional, but that's not how it has to be. And we can create a self-sustainable, member-driven radiology education community. So as you can see from this presentation, hopefully, we went from single institution silos to multi-institution collaborations, but really the goal is to think globally together. And now that we have this community with these networks of live resources and crowdsourced content, when we work together as a community, I hope you can see that it can be contagious. And it turns out you can join too, and come join us in transforming radiology education. May or may not stay on this platform or whatever else it may be. I don't know what it looks like, because everyone in here, I hope, can join, contribute to it, change it, and really create our future together. So thank you, and come learn more about us. And hopefully all these pictures will change as more people join. Thank you.
Wow, thank you. This has just been amazing. Our next speaker is Joseph Phillip, who's the program director at Baylor University Medical Center in Dallas, and he's going to talk about how we can help residents see their learning goals through learning maps.
Hi, my name is Joseph Phillip. Here's a common problem. Resident comes to you and says, how do I get better? And I say, well, that's easy. Just see a lot of cases, study a lot. But then they come back with more questions. They say, I type every day, but I don't get any better at that. There must be more to getting better than just doing a lot of something. And studying is important, but how do I learn the stuff that's not in the textbooks? How do I become a great clinical radiologist? That the whole thing feels like a maze. Where am I headed, and what are the steps to getting better? And so you offer them the ACGME milestones, and they look back at you with a blank stare. And then you say, well, the societies have great curriculums. And they say they just can't visualize it. They can't see it. And you feel for them. You want them to see it. You want them to see the big picture. You want them to see all the steps in between. And so you think, well, maybe a calendar could help them visualize it. Or maybe it's a tree where the branches are labeled, or maybe it's a mind map. Maybe it's a circle where the circles are labeled. Maybe it's a path where there's circles in it. And then you realize what they're looking for is a map. And you want to give them a map. And what would that map look like? And it could be a subway map that helps you get to places. And then you come across the idea of a customer journey map. And what this is you imagine every step along the process. When the person walks into the store, what do they need, and what do they need in every step of the buying process? And these customer journey maps can be quite elaborate and quite rich. And so you can think, well, what would a rich infographic look like? And so this is an infographic, a graphic made by Charles Joseph Minard. And what it is showing is the loss of troops by Napoleon in his downfall. And this gold band is the thickness is the number of troops and the loss of troops as he goes toward Moscow. And this black band is the retreat and even further losses as the band gets narrower. But if you look, there's even more information here. There's lines that are, the squiggly lines are the rivers, and there's places that are labeled. And there's even keyed to the temperature of winter at that time. And so this is Edward Tufte's favorite infographic. He's a scholar on graphics. And what he says is there's three important pieces to an infographic. And the first is complexity. Complexity is a feature. Lean into it. Give the user a lot to process and dive into. 2, story. Story will drive an infographic. And 3 is multiple uses, that the same user or a different user can use a graphic in different ways. So how could we use that to help our residents? Well, we could start with endpoints. So early on, we just need the residents to get some reports out, do some basic flow procedures. Then we need them to take night float. And then we need them to pass the ABR core exam. And then they need to graduate ready to start fellowship in a specialty. And what are those transition points? Well, they need to go from being an intern to learning how to learn radiology. And at the end, we need them to think clinically like their subspecialist. And since we're thinking about clinical radiology, we can emphasize things like communication and the clinical diseases and the specific anatomy that they need. So we can fill all of this in. And we can give them a big picture of what's needed for a residency. And then we can have our subspecialists make it for every subspecialty. So it could look like this for emergency radiology. It could look like this for chest and cardiac radiology. And at this point, we felt like we reached our goal. We started this 2 years ago, and we've given them a big picture. There's complexity. There's some story elements. And then we thought we could use them even at the monthly rotation level, that residents can go into rotations thinking, well, these are things I want to work on. And at the end, we can assess them on that. And then a kind of a work in progress, we can think even at the daily level. That is, we can have specific things that the resident attending together at that day can pick something level appropriate to work on, pick 1 or 2 things to work on. And then we had a separate initiative which was on feedback, to move away from just, hey, great job today, to giving specific feedback. And we could use the learning maps for that. That is, at the end of the day, the resident and the attending together could pick one thing that they did really well, thinking about the learning maps, and then 2, pick one thing that they want to work on next. So this was our big picture. And we use it not for compliance. We still use the ACG milestones for compliance. But really, we use this to inspire the residents. And it's to inspire them with kind of the richness of the journey in the learning, to inspire them to feel like, yes, they can do it, they have a map, and to inspire them to feel they should make every day count. And so, if you make learning maps, inspire us with them tweet it out to us, share it with us at AUR22 or 23. Everything that we've made is freely available. You can use it in any way that you want. It's on this simple website, radiologycraft.com/AUR. And so if the resident comes to you and they're looking for direction, inspire them. Inspire them with a map and show them all the destinations that they could go to and use the map so that you can join them on that journey. Thank you and safe travels home.
That was amazing. And now I am very proud to, let me get you all loaded up here, introduce to you Ali. He is one of our R4 research track residents at Penn, a former chief resident. The key to his heart is food. During his fourth year, he has been working on different uses of augmented reality in radiology. He is going to be staying on at Penn for his abdominal fellowship. And then I have my fingers crossed. He's going to accept the position of being Deputy Vice Chair of our Practice Transformation Center. And today you're going to, okay. And today you're going to hear about chest x-ray, the new lab value.
So I'm going to ask that you save all your tomatoes until later, and that'll make sense in a bit. So like most of you, when the pandemic hit, my kids and I were looking for something we could do at home, a hobby. And after much discussion, we ended up with gardening. We got ourselves a nice rose bush. We watered it, planted, got a nice bloom in the spring. Then we sort of forgot about them. And fast forward, it's, the end of the winter. And I wake up one morning to just crying, wailing. I go to the kitchen. I see my 4-year-old just sobbing. Snot running down her face, and deciphering between the sobs, I realize she thinks I've killed her favorite plant. And I guess technically it looked that way. The night before, I'd been reading on Wikipedia, and they said that pruning is good for plants. So I went out there with my scissors and really hacked away at it. I was just trying to do good for the plant. I was trying to make it better. But what my daughter saw was, a maniacal madman who'd killed her favorite, her first plant, her favorite plant. And I was like trying to save the situation. I was telling her about pruning, farmers do it, it helps make the plant stronger and better. You get bigger blooms. She wasn't buying it. She looks at me, she's like, Daddy, you're not a farmer. You're just a doctor. Do you even know what you're doing? Maybe you should leave it to the experts. My ego was hurt a little, but, I'm not a farmer. But, maybe I did have something to learn from the experts. So, back in the golden age of radiology, we used to do it all. We would position patients, we'd expose films, we'd develop films, we'd dictate reports, and we had the time to do it and play squash at lunch. And now, volumes are out of control. We are burning out, we're overworked, we're understaffed, wellness is a joke, and I was thinking, do we have something to learn from farmers? Is there something that we can prune from radiology to make us thrive? But like my daughter, it's hard. It's like we love everything. We love all our blooms. How do you pick which is the thing that you get rid of? And they got me thinking about potassium. So back in the day, potassium levels were really hard to get. Hypodermic needles were just invented. The chemicals were expensive. It took days to get a result back from the lab. And even if you got the lab result back, we didn't know what normal was. You'd have to talk to a clinical pathologist to help explain the results, like, was the sample lysed? What did it mean? And, the truth was, if your patient had hyperkalemia, they're probably dead because it took you like 7 days to get the lab result back. Now, modern medicine, potassium labs are a single-click order in the EMR. 15 minutes, if they have hyperkalemia or not. And I was thinking, how did labs get so fast and cheap? And we have our pathology colleagues to thank for them. Not these pathology counts, but in general, they realized that, fast, cheap labs were good. It was good for patient care. And they realized that to make it that way, they had to get themselves out of the lab. They invented the automated machines that now are the workhorse of the clinical pathology lab. Okay, so potassium, workhorse, and I was thinking, okay, what's the workhorse of radiology? And, X-rays. And that's when it clicked. Okay? We need to think of X-rays like lab values. Just like lab values, they used to be expensive, slow, low volume. Now, they're cheap, they're high volume, we can do them in seconds. But whereas lab values, we're like, hey, ordering providers, you can interpret your own values. For some reason, we still insist that radiologists have to read the X-ray. But it doesn't have to be that way. And I'm sure you guys are all thinking it, because I get this a lot. They're like, but what about patient care? It's the first thing I get. It's just not right, it's not safe to have a non-radiologist read an X-ray. And I don't think that's true. Going back to potassium. Pathologists run the clinical labs, but we don't have ordering providers call the lab every single time they get a lab value to discuss the result with the pathologist, to make sure that they have gotten the interpretation right. And it works the same way with X-rays. I mean, we all know, like the ICU attending, they can see where the endotracheal tube tip is. They can see if there's a large enough pneumothorax, not those apical things that you hallucinate, but like something that actually needs a chest tube. And so by the time we read it, a couple hours afterwards, we haven't really added much. And we've been here before. EKGs, when they first came out, they were read by cardiologists, the domain experts. But now medical students do it. And what's more, we have automated interpretation. That is so good, we let AEDs decide when to shock a patient. No cardiology involvement. And cardiology still survived. In fact, now they actually have the time that when they have a really hard EKG, they can be the experts they are and help explain. They're not drowning in a sea of normal or easy to interpret EKGs. And we're seeing this in radiology. I'm telling you, the machines are coming for us. They're coming to read our X-rays, and it's a good thing. Okay? It'll allow ordering providers to understand what's going on in the X-rays, and it'll just make the radiology report that much more redundant. But it's okay, because we have to also remember that, unlike the good old days, we have more than just X-rays now. We have the CTs, and the MRs, and the ultrasound, and the PETs, and the bone scans. The ordering provider doesn't have to get it right the first time. They can see this, and they're like, I think it's a snowman, but who am I? And they get a CT. And within a minute, you got a radiologist saying, hey, this is total anomalous pulmonary venous return. The next thing we get is also this is going to kill the job market. Radiologists will have nothing to do. Also, I don't think that's true. And once again, I asked my pathology friends, and they're like, are you upset that we have ordering providers reading lab values, that you've been taking out of the loop? And of course, they look at me and they're laughing. The response, reminds me of another story. When the first ATM came out, they were just vilified by the bank tellers union. Bank tellers predicted absolute catastrophe, the financial system in ruin. But it really came from a place of fear, because they knew the ATMs worked harder, longer, cheaper, and they're going to be out of work. But a funny thing happened, right? The number of bank tellers actually went up, because ATMs drove the cost of banking so far down that there was an explosion of banks. And so while any given bank had fewer tellers, there were more tellers altogether. And what's more, the tellers were freed of the grunt work. They weren't just changing money. They could do more interesting things with their jobs. Financial instruments, foreign exchange. All right, I'm coming to a close. So we're coming back to radiology. I know it's blasphemous in this crowd, but I think the time is right. We need to step away from the humble X-ray. It's time for us to think of it as a lab value, something we facilitate, but we don't interpret. Something that we can prune from radiology so that we as an organism and as an organization can thrive. We can make the radiology job sustainable again. Now, it won't be a complete goodbye, right? We'll still do QA/QI on the X-ray machines. We'll still help develop the AI algorithms. We'll still be consulted on the really difficult X-rays. But for the majority of them, we don't have to interpret these mountains of images. And now just think, what could you do with all this time and energy that you have? With all these resources? You could go to the multidisciplinary conferences that you always wanted to do. You can invent the next modality. Or, we could actually focus on ourselves, on our own wellness. We can maybe, dare I say, go home early not just on time, get home, and maybe plant our own garden? Though, I will say, hopefully you'll do it with a lot less crying than what happens in my house. And with that, I thank you.
All right, so I have the pleasure of introducing our final speaker, Dr. Susan Summerton, who's a breast and body imager from Penn Medicine and a medical artist. She's passionate about medical education and physician well-being, and she'll be sharing her thoughts on how to take small steps to create more joy and less stress in your lives as she talks to us about bringing art and creativity into your life.
Good morning. I'm Sue Summerton, and I'm here to convince you that bringing or keeping art and creativity in your life will definitely promote wellness. And I'll take you step by step through that. And this is not advancing. The bottom? Okay. So why am I the person speaking to this? I became an accidental artist a few years ago, inspired by this poster I had in my house on the left called the Butterfly Alphabet. It was published in 1975. This photographer found the patterns of the letters A through Z and the numbers 1 through 9 on butterfly and moth wings and made a poster. So I would come home from work and see that every day, and then I'd go to work, and occasionally I'd read an X-ray and see a letter. I'm sure you all see a shape or a symbol now and then. So I decided to save these letters in my teaching file with the goal of making me a poster in my office just for me of A to Z and 1 to 9. Well, fast forward to 2014, and the RSNA had a contest to submit your most interesting radiology art. And I looked at my teaching file, realized I had all the letters of the alphabet, spelled out their slogan that year, submitted it, and it won honorable mention. So the first piece I ever made ended up displayed in front of 50,000 people in Chicago. So since then, I've been creating art that I'm inspired to create. I also make pieces for people to gift to each other or put on walls for medical art. And you'll see some of this throughout my talk. But I want to tell you a patient's story where art really led to an unexpected and very profound connection between me and a patient. In 2018, I was working in Scranton, Pennsylvania, also known as the Electric City, more well known for the site of the filming of The Office. And I was working very closely with a breast surgeon who came in my office one day and said, "Hey, Sue, listen, I just did a biopsy on a pretty suspicious mass on this woman's breast. But we got to talking, and she's an artist and an illustrator, and she's the coolest person, and you have to meet her. I told her, you're an artist. Can I bring her in your office?" So next thing I knew, in walks cute little Angie DeMoro into my office, holding an ice pack up to her breast, saying, "Hi, I'm Angie. I heard you're an artist. I'm an artist. Can I see your art?" She was the most enthusiastic person I ever met. Looked around my office. I showed her some of my art. She told me about herself. She was illustrating children's books and publishing. And in the middle of the conversation, she stopped dead in the middle of it and looked at me with the ice pack and said, "Am I going to be okay? I'm really scared." And I said, "Angie, you are going to be okay. Dr. Kelly is the best surgeon. She will take care of you no matter what you have. You are going to do fine. You are going to come out and you're going to look at this someday as a bump in the road." And she still looked nervous. And I didn't know if I should hug her or what to do. And so I said, "Angie, can I gift you a piece of my art?" She said, "Wow, that would be really nice." So I had this piece called Love on my wall, and I handed it to her. So she took it and she held it against her and she looked at me. She said, "You're not going to believe this. The book I just published last month, my most recent book, is called Love, A Story of Who You Truly Are." And at that moment, we just looked at each other. That was the deepest connection I think I've ever made so quickly. And it all had to do with our art. Now, Angie went on and she did have breast cancer and she went through the treatment and she did an amazing thing. She illustrated it with optimism, with humor, with positivity, with gratitude. She's actually writing a book and publishing it. She's helped other people. But I just want to share with you one of the examples. You picture on the right radiation therapy of laying there and there's a beam coming across your breast. Angie, the eternal optimist, imagined every day that she went for radiation, there was a shower head over her and she was being showered with love and red hearts. And that's her attitude. And this helped her get through it We are still friends today. She's doing well. But I just want you to know that art helped her, and I think art can help us through stressful times. So burnout, I won't go into great detail, just one statistic. Over 60% of us radiologists right now are exhibiting symptoms of stress and burnout. There are resources available to you through the ACR, et cetera. I'm going to tell you about 3 different resources I found really helpful, and I suggest you check out. The first is a TED Talk I saw entitled Where Joy Hides and How to Find It. The woman who gave the TED Talk is a fashion designer. She makes clothes, and she once had somebody say to her, you know, your dress really brings me joy. And she was curious about that. Like, well, what about my dress brings you joy? And what exactly is joy? So joy is defined as a momentary experience of positive emotion. And she researched it further and found that there are things that bring all of us joy, no matter our age, no matter where we live in the world. And these common things include pops of bright color, round or curved objects, many of the same thing, like confetti or sprinkles on an ice cream cone, or a sense of lightness, like a hot air balloon or bubbles, something like that. And we can bring elements like this into our lives, both at home and at work, and make a difference in your daily experience. They've done studies. They show people who work in offices like you see on the left are much less productive and less happy at the end of the day than people who work in offices with bright colors. Children who go to school that have colorful exteriors and colorful lunchrooms, they have a better attendance record. They learn better. They're happier at school. Your environment makes a difference. Even the Sheraton downtown Phoenix knows this. I added this slide 2 days ago. I couldn't help but notice when you go out to the carport and you look up, there's round things and bright pops of color. When you take the escalator and go down, look up. There are these things hanging, a feeling of lightness, multiple of the same things. It's all around you. You just need to look. This is what I do at work. This is your generic lead apron. This is my lead apron. Now, I've had this forever. I've had this before the Joy Talk. This matters to people. When I walk in the room with my lead apron, they look at me, they smile. The fear that they had sort of dissipates a little bit. I even had a Penn professor last Friday. I took this picture in the morning. In the afternoon, a Penn professor came in for a video swallow. She studies psychology and anxiety specifically. And she looked at this and said, wow, that's a really joyful lead apron. And so, mission accomplished. In our breast center, we have art everywhere. It matters to us and our patients. In the stereo room, I have my X-ray alphabet. Patients having procedures spell names of their friends and family, and it distracts them. So the art matters. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. This is another source that I recommend you check out. It's a course you can do online for free. Laurie Santos teaches a course at Yale. It's the most popular course ever, called The Science of Well-Being. The thing she emphasizes is having experiences. It's not getting things, buying things. It's creating experiences that make a difference. So go out there and experience experiences. Play bubble soccer. If you have residents, tell them to go out and have a picnic. Have them carve pumpkins. Look how happy everybody looks doing new things. The last source I'm going to tell you about is a book I read in 2 days called The Power of Fun. The author was curious, how could I bring more fun in my life, and what is fun? You need 3 conditions for fun: playfulness, connection, and flow. Flow is when you're in such a great activity that you don't realize the time is passing. And the only way to have these 3 conditions lead to true fun is if you're paying attention. And the only way to pay attention is disconnect. So put your phones down, get a group of people together, and do anything that lights you up. These are a few things that lit up residents that I've worked with. We had an Iron Chef party on the left. The secret ingredient was mango. It was chaotic. It tasted delicious. And we talked about it for weeks. The image on the right, a bunch of residents went out and painted. We were all supposed to paint the same flowers. It didn't quite come out that way. Great time. Do all the things. And one idea I want you to take back with you, and something I did with my residents this year, I had them submit to me an image of something they did, artistic or creative. And then we met as a group virtually, and I brought up the image of what they sent, and we guessed whose it was. And then once we identified whose it was, they talked about it. What made them do it? What did they feel doing it? Did they gift it to somebody? It was such a great way to get to know each other. It's something I want to continue, and I think you can maybe bring that back to your program, and that way you can emphasize creativity and wellness as being important. Lastly, for those of you sitting in the audience who say, wait, I am not an artist, I am not creative, you're talking to the wrong person, I'm going to give you this as a demonstration. I painted this. This is a picture of my daughter. I can't paint. I have a secret. I cheated. This is a paint by number. You can take a photograph and send it away, and a company will send you back the brushes, the paints, the canvas, and you can paint, and you can be a painter. I made these for my sons. I made that for my daughter. It was a great Christmas. Time stood still. I'm obsessed by this, and I highly recommend you try it. So in summary, using Angie's art and my art, do more of what sparks joy in you. Really make the time to have fun. Embrace that you are creative. Somewhere in there is a creative side. And if you do all of these things, it will bring you happiness. Thank you.
All right. Well, I have to clear my voice here. Maybe I had a few tears and a lot of emotion during this last hour. So thank you so much to our amazing speakers. We have a bit of time for questions or comments for the speakers. I encourage those of you who are attending online to enter their questions into the chat box, and I'll have our speakers come up to the microphones. Yes, one more round for these inspiring and moving speakers.
Come on, bring it on. Some questions, comments. Let's do it.
Question, but I would love to hear from everybody who was involved in this process, particularly the speakers that were really, I think, so fortunate to have people guiding them through these presentations. And I think part of the greatness of this meeting is that we share each other's teaching abilities, give feedback, reflect on how we're teaching. I'd be curious to hear from some of the speakers, sort of how did they find that process and what did they learn from it?
All right, we're using these mics?
Please speak into the microphone.
So I'm going to start. So I will say, I think one of the hardest part is, I put together a lot of talks, and it's so easy to put together a talk and not get feedback until you do the presentation because you're so scared to hear the bad part. And so I think really, as the organizers did, forcing us to be like, hey, on this date, you're going to do a practice talk. So at least you get that first, someone else to view it. Another thing I also highly recommend is, so I had my wife who's not in medicine sit through my talk several times, which was key because we often forget that there's a world outside medicine, and I would say things that she'd understand, and she really helped hone in, if I could get the message across to her, I could get it across to anyone. And so I really encourage, giving the talk to someone who's not in medicine, someone who, is close enough that can really tell you, hey, this sucks, this is awful, this makes no sense, and that's really key to making the good talk.
I'd like to mention that I thought doing this was a creative process, and creativity is important. And I had to think outside of the box. I'm normally teaching GI radiology, torsion and volvulus, but this allowed me and gave me the room to really open up and bring out my creative side. So I love that part of it.
I really loved meeting everybody throughout this process. I think that was what was really fun this time, right? Because usually making a presentation by yourself, and all of a sudden we were having sessions, and I thought it was really cute to also, I think Dr. Robbins started and said, hey, we want to hear your stories. And I think that was unique also because a lot of the presentations we do are very dry, but I realized it brought that extra dimension of understanding where we were coming from and changed I think at least my presentation a lot. And getting tips from people across different levels was really helpful. And this was it's really fun. I hope other people thought it was fun. Otherwise, my name is John.
I'd like to add that one of my favorite parts was seeing how this group helped each other and that peer mentorship and sort of this collaborative effort for people who weren't even personally invested in someone else's talk, had really creative, inspiring ideas for each other. And part of my emotion had to do with the content of the talks, but a lot of it had to do with like the talks that blossomed and how things evolved over time. And like, I'm so proud.
Yeah, really great talks from everyone. I really enjoyed this session and we'll be coming back in the future. But my question's for Rooshab. Regarding the blockchain rating system that you talked about, how do you imagine healthcare organizations motivating that kind of change that you would like to see, where we are the ones at the table making decisions with the creators of the technology to make sure that they comply with our demands? And in addition, do you see any role for government regulation in helping to enforce those ideas that we want to push forward to sustainability?
Sure, I really appreciate that question. I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Nambi, I'm coming from Penn.
Oh, nice to meet you. I think that question can be broken up into 4 or 5 separate parts. So I think first and foremost, I think really the crux of my talk was that we need to place this on the radars of stakeholders in the imaging community. I think just by broadening awareness of this as a discrete issue to be tackled is kind of, you know, the fundamental place to start, because so much of what we do every day is related to interpretive tasks, with, you know, a sliver left over for administration combined with teaching, if you know, for those of us working in academic settings. So it's kind of bucket A. I think bucket B is there's a lot more to the imaging enterprise than what we do every day as physicians. There are other stakeholders who are not radiologists, such as, you know, coders, billers, people who are working in the back office, people in insurance companies, as well as in the echelons of administration of our specific clinics, who would be making these strategic utilization decisions. Unfortunately, the level of consultation with physicians could be, of course, you know, expanded somewhat. But I think if we're all focused on the same general discussion on sustainability, I think there could be a lot of, you know, creative solutions that we could all formulate given the unique perspectives we bring to the table. The third thing you mentioned was, you know, how is this actually implemented into practice? Certainly, I'd love to hear your thoughts offline as well. But the way that I had conceptualized this was, you know, a third party, a non-governmental, non-clinical entity, perhaps one under the auspices of a professional organization like AUR itself, performing these types of broad, you know, classifications of, you know, what we look into when vetting these new products. They wouldn't be implementing on a day-to-day basis, but at least articulating the criteria that we should be keeping in mind when purchasing these types of software products. And the last is, you know, the role for government intervention. I think that, you know, of course, that's one way to kind of push through change, but the government's very big and it's very slow. And I think that a lot of these issues are, quite frankly, very time sensitive, particularly as they relate to the environment. We really can't tarry or you know, push things off any further. I think it's best to really begin to think about these broader sustainability issues at the level of the individual institution and scale upward from there. And that's why I think that professional societies have a much more pivotal role to play in this space than perhaps a top-down governmental type of framework.
Petra Lewis, Dartmouth. I want to congratulate you all on doing this. We did a similar thing at RSNA with our trad talks, and it was hugely successful. And I think this should be an annual thing. I really hope you continue this as an annual thing. I would also really encourage you that, to record these talks and put them up on the AUR YouTube channel so that they can be generally accessible to, everyone. I think you'd be surprised at how much interest there would be in them. And finally, Susan, I so totally agree with you. My creative outlet has always been making colourful clothes, as you can see. I'm not anyone who's seen me at this meeting has seen kind of like the output of my creativity. And for me, it's been, better than a couple of glasses of wine in the evening doing this. I mean, not that I haven't been known to sew under the influence, as my kids call it, as well. Explains a lot of the backwards sleeves and things. But anyway, totally agree with you and encourage anyone to do it.
So this will be an annual event. There already is one talk up on the YouTube channel from a speaker who wasn't able to attend today. So take a look at the AUR YouTube channel and you'll see that one there, and we'll get the rest of these up there as well.
Thank you for all of the speakers for the talks this morning. Very inspiring, very enlightening. I have two questions. First one will be for Rooshab, and second one will be for Ali. So I like to draw an analogy for blockchain technology to quantum computing. Quantum's very good for analyzing multifactorial problems, but not necessarily very effective for linear calculation. I think it's kind of same for blockchain. It's really good for decentralized things that are decentralized in nature. But intrinsically, it's relatively inefficient. Like you mentioned, energy consumption and calculation time is slower. How do you see that fitting into the radiology workflow? How do we maximize the potential that it has?
Sure. I think that's a good question that's well taken, with many points that were well taken. I think that while I'm no Luddite, I don't want the audience to construe my talk as being one of forcing through adoption of these types of novel technologies with abandon. I think that, to your point, it is accompanied with a number of unique costs that might not lend themselves to scaling or to particular applications in the imaging space as much as some of these service providers or entities in the media would have us believe. I just want to place this on our radar, as we've seen, a number of these new products make their way into the market, into academic publications, touting them as these new cool, novelty items. But again, I think that needs to be tempered by this broader vision of how they can actually be streamlined and integrated into clinical use. And it's kind of like a square peg into a round hole issue.
Yeah, I feel like oftentimes we're limited by our imagination and not the technology itself. For Ali, so before I became a medicine trainee, I was trained as a pathology technician. And before, obviously everything's automated now, but before we send out the reports, all the technicians still go through it, make sure there's no critical errors. And I really share a vision on, AI is not going to replace jobs, but it's going to actually create more opportunity. So do you think there might be a segment where it could utilize AI as in artificial intelligence or augmented intelligence and create a new segment where maybe there's like a mid-level-ish position for radiology and they can go through, oh yeah, there's no critical errors with X-ray AI interpretation. This is just a skin fold, not a pneumothorax. Maybe we can create a new segment like below resident radiology, but maybe like above, I don't know, intern level. Maybe there's like a new segment. What's your idea on that?
Yeah, I mean, our chair is always big about, everyone should operate at the top of their license. And, I think identifying those segments. And, a year ago, I learned about this company where they're integrating their AI directly into the portable machine. So when you take the X-ray and then, on the LCD, it shows you the image and it also shows you a report. And I think that is what you kind of get at is like, you could have the technologist with the help of this augmented intelligence, they can check the image in real time, right? They can say like, oh, if there's a big pneumothorax, right? The attending, right, the ICU attending who can put a chest tube in is right next to you. You don't have to send that down to radiology, wait for them, do all that stuff. And so I think that's what we're going to do is we're going to be elevating the people who take the images to empower them to say like, hey, this is something that needs to be done now. There's a big problem. Whereas like the subtle stuff, right, that's still going to need the radiologist. That's going to be, something that might go to tumor board and be like, oh, like is this little speck here? Like, could this be a new tumor cell? Like, and I do think, just as you said, it's going to, ordering providers are going to have the AI so that, they can, if they don't need the radiologist, they'll just treat the patient, the MSK, the orthopod, right? It's a fracture, I'm going to stent it, I don't need the radiology report. And they can have that background AI that says, hey, there's nothing else that's major on here, don't worry about it.
Yeah, maybe they're.
We are at time, so I'm going to ask the rest of the questions to come up to the front at the end. I want to just take a quick moment to incorporate some of the feedback that we've got from the online audience. So when you hear the applause at the end, please incorporate an extra. The whole double the response from the audience online, because there was a really positive feedback from those of the people that are watching online. So thank you again for this outstanding session, and thank you all for being here today.